Is it possible to co-parent with a narcissist? Yes or no? In my opinion, the answer is no. Hello to all of the empathic souls out there, the highly sensitive ones and the chosen ones, blessed ones, divine ones. Hello to all of you. Let's talk about today whether or not it's possible to co-parent with a narcissist. I feel like absolutely not, because you and the narcissist are not on the same page. There's tons and tons of things that you don't agree about. Your nature is totally different from each other. So it makes it very hard to be on the same page or one accord when it comes to parenting the children or child that you have together. Pretty much whatever you decide to do, the narcissist is going to do that of the contrary. So, speaking of that, let's define contrary. So, contrary means being opposite in nature, direction, or meaning. Two or more statements or beliefs opposed to one another. When it comes to the wind, it means blowing in the opposite direction of one's course. So, it's literally like fighting against the wind when it comes to the narcissist. To disagree or do the opposite of what is expected or desired, and that's definitely true. It also means conflict. You can count on conflict with a narcissist. Basically, it just comes to the point where you are tired of fighting, tired of arguing, and tired of defending yourself when it comes to trying to co-parent with a narcissist. It will be counter-parenting instead of co-parenting. They will literally go against what you say or go against your decisions just to have that opposing side there, just to not be in agreement with you, just to create chaos. It's basically like the song says, trouble in my way, I have to cry sometimes. But Jesus, he will fix it after a while. So the first thing that I noticed the narcissist being contrary to was the fact that our very young son received a diagnosis of autism. My son was supposed to be saying a certain number of words by a certain age as a toddler, and he wasn't. He didn't really engage in social activities with other children. He stopped making eye contact, and he started to just use sounds instead of talking. It got to the point to where he had to learn sign language just to communicate with me. It was a very tough thing to go through on its own, and it made it even tougher that the narcissist refused to accept this diagnosis for the child. He refused to accept and acknowledge the fact that the child did need help trying to learn how to communicate. He just brushed it off, and he was very nonchalant about the whole situation. So when it came to taking the child back and forth to the doctor, taking the child to see therapists to try to get help and things like that, the narcissist was not on board with that. He did not participate in any of the visits and different things like that. So that made it very challenging for me. It wasn't a co-parenting situation. It was pretty much like single parenting situation, even though I was married. So I had to take on a lot of coaching my son and teaching him and working with him, learning alphabets and, lots of different training materials and books and different things like that. And I kept working with him, and I never gave up on him. And he did eventually learn to talk. But it was really hard not to have, both parents participating in that, because during that process, when my son was learning how to talk and everything like that, he got to the point to where he relied on me very, very heavily. And a lot of times he wanted to revert back to the sounds and not use words, because he knew that mama knew what those sounds meant. So it was just kind of hard to carry that load, on my own. So fast forward to the terms of the divorce when it comes to joint custody and co-parenting. The narcissist will pick out parts of the divorce decree that they are okay with following, and then the rest of the parts that they feel like don't benefit them in any way, they will not follow those aspects of the divorce decree. For instance, when it comes to pick up and drop off times, the narcissist could adhere to dropping the child off on time at 6:30 when it was time to drop off. But as far as picking up the child, he would be 5, 6, 7 hours late to pick up the child at 6:30 p.m. This makes it hard on the child as well. They're standing at the door with this expectation, knowing that they're supposed to be picked up at 6:30 and they're waiting for hours and hours and hours and promises and promises, and then the narcissist doesn't show up. It's very disappointing. It's very hurtful to both the other parent and the child. Another thing about the divorce decree is the narcissist will refuse to do certain things that they, you know, don't find beneficial to them or that they don't like. For instance, the narcissist refuses to pay half of our son's medical bills even though he is ordered to. Another thing that the narcissist will do to counterparent with you is to disconnect from things uh, like extracurricular activities or school activities involving the child. So, with autism, you know, our son, did have some behavior challenges at school. He was bullied, and it was hard for him to, interact with the teachers and even the students because of his communication issues. He would try to talk, and then sometimes what he would say wouldn't come out quite right, or he would try to talk, but then he would revert back to his nonverbal communication. So it created some problems at school, and the school would call me and my son's father quite a bit, asking for advice or help or assistance, or either asking us to pick up the child from the school because they really didn't know what else to do. And so, all the time, when the school would call the narcissist would not answer his phone. He refused to answer. And then the school would call me all the time at work, or call me while I'm at work to come get my son, call me on the phone to talk to him while I'm at work to try to calm him down from his meltdowns and things like that. And instead of the narcissist answering the phone when the school called, the narcissist would call me and ask me what the school wanted, as if our son was not also his son as well. To me, what that says is he didn't care enough to get involved. He didn't care enough to talk to the school officials to find out what was going on with his son, to try to protect his son in any way, and also try to help with whatever issues that our son, was having. So there again, not being on the same page as far as, trying to help the child, as far as trying to rectify the situation. There is no working together with a narcissist when it comes to complex issues, when it comes to problem solving. They are not working with you, they're working against you. They're taking a hands off approach and they really don't care. They're not just acting like they don't care, they actually don't care. If something is not easy breezy for the narcissist, they pretty much want no parts of it. And so with autism, it's a fight. You have to kind of dig in with your heels and fight against it to help your child. The narcissist doesn't have much of a sense of commitment, so they're not going to be committed to fight even for their own child. Another thing that was a source of conflict as far as co-parenting was our belief system about certain holidays. The narcissist was okay with celebrating Halloween. He was okay with having our son dressed up in costumes and go and do trick-or-treating and all of that. I was not. I was not for that. And so that just created a lot of conflict because he felt like, I was not allowing the child to be a child. And for me, I always want to tell my child the truth. And so I wanted to be truthful and transparent with him about the meaning of that holiday. And the same thing with Santa Claus. The narcissist felt like, oh, you know, you're being a mean person. You don't want this child to have an imagination and you don't want him to think about Santa Claus and have a childhood. And it wasn't that. I just didn't want to fib to him. I wanted to tell him the truth. There is no such thing as that. If you're looking at any kind of gifts or toys, they're going to be from your mom. Santa is not bringing them. And I just wanted him to have that truth. I never wanted to start off lying to my child. That was out for me. And so the narcissist just didn't share the same beliefs as I did. Another co-parenting issue that I had with the narcissist was conflict on the child's injuries that he would succumb to or his sickness. So the narcissist liked to sweep things under the rug quite a bit. That's pretty much how he lived his life, sweeping things under the rug, pretending that problems didn't exist, et cetera, et cetera. So when it came to our son, it was the same thing. When our son was over at the narcissist residence for visitation, one time my son got a terrible crook in his neck. And the narcissist did not tend to our son for that whole weekend that he was there. He waited until it was time to return the child to me. And when I saw my son couldn't move his neck at all, I knew right away that he needed to go to the hospital. Now, he was in the narcissist's possession this whole time. The narcissist had our son's insurance card. I gave him, a card for our son in case of emergencies. So he could have and should have very well taken our son to the hospital during his visit. But instead, he allowed our son to suffer the entire weekend until it was time to drop him back off at my house. And immediately, I went to the emergency room with my son. And the doctors tell me that the crook in his neck was not going to go away on its own. His muscle was completely locked. He had this hump on his neck, and the muscle was not going to unlock. It needed to be relaxed. And they had to give my son Valium to relax that muscle. And I was deeply upset by that. I just don't understand how he can see his own child in that kind of pain and not do anything about it. It was beyond me. There was another incident where my son got a foreign object stuck in his foot while he was in visitation with the narcissist. And my son was told to walk it off. So when my son got back home, with the autism and everything, it makes them not communicate as they should, not want to communicate. And so I had to figure out that my son was injured. And what makes it worse is the narcissist knew that my son incurred an injury and he didn't tell me. He didn't disclose it to me. I just think that that's very irresponsible to see a child be injured in your presence while in your care and not talk to the other parent about it. It's beyond me. And this poor child was trying to walk it out as he was instructed, walk it off. And he was in a lot of pain. And because he was told to walk it off, his skin started to close up around the object. So he's walking on his injury because he was instructed to by the narcissist. So when I found the injury, I took my son to the doctor and he had to have surgery to get it removed. I took my son to all of the doctor's visits, and on his day of surgery, the narcissist didn't show up. It's just tough to think about. It's a tough thing to endure when you know that the child has a parent that's still living, but they're not being the parent that they should or could be to the child. It's very disheartening. The last thing that I'll mention here is, I would say, not being allowed to, because that's how I was made to feel. Not being allowed to take our son to go visit a professional barber to cut his hair. I received a lot of flack from the narcissist and his family when I took our son to go get his hair professionally cut. The reason I took our son to get a professional haircut was because the narcissist would use his beard clippers on our son's head, and it caused a rash infection around my son's hairline. And in general, the narcissist would use his own clippers on the child's head. And I bought a set of clippers for my son. I sent them over with my son, but apparently he refused to use those, and just lots of different things like that. And so it caused, a lot of skin issues and different things like that with my son. And, you know, I was scolded after I took our son to see a professional barber. I was told, oh, I'm taking away the father-son time. I am, disrupting the bond that they could have between the two of them. I was told that I shouldn't take that away from the narcissist. All these things. It's made to feel really, really bad for trying to, in my mind, care for my son's hair and his scalp. But it was turned around to make it feel like, I'm not a good parent, or I'm not a good person, when I was trying to care for my son in the best way that I could. So narcissist has this thing of not wanting to be one-upped. They don't want you to believe or feel like someone is better at something than they are, especially another man. And so for me, it wasn't about that. That was the furthest thing from my mind. My point was to make sure that my son's skin and scalp heals and gets better. So it's just this constant fight, this constant conflict. You can never do anything right as a parent when it comes to the narcissist. They always know best. And it's basically, you can't win. So present day, I don't have that many issues right now because I've learned to disconnect and not engage. So I don't engage in the arguments. I have blocked phone numbers and different things when I need to. So I've learned to, not participate in the conflict. And I think that's been key to being able to co-parent, if you will. I just don't engage. I basically only talk about the things that need to be talked about concerning our son. I have switched to speaking with the narcissist, like via text, on my son's phone. So that's how we communicate now. And that has been working out a lot better for me. It's just you learning how to take your power back, because since the narcissist can no longer control you through the marriage, you have disconnected the marriage by divorcing them. So sometimes they will use the child to try to control you, control your behavior through the child. And so you have to cut that connection off as well. You can't give them any avenue or street to go down when it comes to power and control. 1 Timothy 1:10 talks about people that are contrary to sound doctrine. And that's what the narcissist is. They are contrary to what is good and acceptable and holy unto God. Matthew 14:24. But the ship was now in the midst of the sea, tossed with waves, for the wind was contrary. And that's how it is with the narcissist when you're trying to co-parent. It's pretty much all over the place. It's tossed to and fro. It's spinning around in circles. It's not going on a straight and narrow path. Co-parenting with a narcissist can be very difficult, but you can't go wrong when you follow the word of God. Pray about the difficult situations. Try to reason with the narcissist if it's possible. Do not engage in arguments. Put out fires. Don't engage in conflict, fighting, and going back and forth. Give it over to the Lord Jesus Christ. Take your hands off the situation. God is the ultimate conflict resolver. He is the ultimate problem solver. Do not walk into the enemy's territory. Always walk into the marvelous light.